My name is Taylor Abba, and I'm doing my presentation on the growth hormones and antibiotics used in food production. Before I begin, I wanted to provide you with some background information on growth hormones, especially in the terms of definitions. For example, hormones is just a basic term. Hormones are chemical messengers that release messages and signals into the bloodstream to control important body functions like growth, development, and reproduction. Examples of regular hormones include insulin, estrogen, adrenaline, and so on. Steroid hormones are slightly different. These are formulated pellets that are placed on the back side of the animal's ear under the skin that slowly dissolve, which is interesting to note because since they're located behind the ear, they're safe for human consumption because the ears of the treated animals are discarded at slaughter. It's also important to note that all approved steroid products have a 0-day withdrawal. A 0-day withdrawal means that an animal is safe for human consumption at any time after the animal is treated, and there should not be any hormone or antibiotic residue in the byproducts of the animal. Naturally occurring hormones are naturally produced throughout the lifespan and are needed for normal development, growth, and reproduction. In terms of reproduction and what's necessary for this lesson, we look at estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Synthetic hormones are improved, man-made, or synthetic versions of natural hormones in place of the estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Examples of synthetic hormones include trenbolone acetate and zeranol. Some additional background information on growth hormones include that growth hormones in genetically modified organisms were first accepted into the market in 1994 and then were quickly expanded globally to mass produce these crops. You have probably heard of GMOs, GMs, or organic foods before, especially with its wide popularity in recent years. But what is a GMO? A GMO is a living organism that has been modified genetically by inserting an unrelated species gene into it. Normally, these injections are used to make the crop look prettier, grow faster, grow bigger, etc. Now, organic food is typically a more popular label and is normally a separate section in the grocery aisles. Organic foods are food products that do not contain any biotechnology-produced ingredients, not necessarily the absence of GM ingredients, which can sometimes be confusing to consumers. The U.S. cultivates the largest amount of GM and growth hormone crops compared to any other country. However, close second and third are Brazil and China. GMO crops now occupy more than 180 million hectares worldwide, and a hectare is about 4 regular acres. It's important to note some demographics in terms of this issue. So gender differences and income levels have been found to influence one's attitude towards the use of growth hormones and antibiotics. Research shows that income levels greatly influence attitudes towards GMO, with low-income populations having the most distribution of these products, mainly because they cannot afford the non-GMO or organic. So again, cost is a major factor because those with high social economic status, or SES, do not have to worry about price and often choose non-GMO products because they have the ability to do so. It's also important to note that the gender difference is still being studied, but it shows that women are more likely to be hesitant in choosing GMO products. It's also important to know that acceptance and awareness of GMOs appears to be greater in developed countries as compared to developing countries. Some researchers attribute this to the fact that developing countries hardly have food access, so this isn't really an issue. Now, let's talk about some background information on antibiotics. Antibiotics are administered to keep animals healthy and promote the quality of their meat. It's important to note that sometimes antibiotics can influence the taste of meat, so some people are actually able to decipher which meat products have been treated or not treated with antibiotics. Antibiotics are administered on a regular basis to cause weight gain rather than to treat illness, which is a major public health issue, which I will discuss later. Antibiotics are administered to animals via their food or water source. In some countries, about 80% of total use of medically important antibiotics are used in the animal sector for growth promotion rather than health promotion. Two commonly used antibiotics in animals are tetracyclines and ionophores. So, as previously stated, some implications for public health include the overuse or inappropriate usage and abuse of antibiotics and resulting these bacteria developing resistance to these antibiotics. The most common antibiotics that are contributing the most to this epidemic are the low-dose and prophylactic antibiotics. So, antibiotic-resistant bacteria is a major issue because it greatly impacts public health. Meaning, animal production is the biggest contributor of this emergence, and it results in over 2 million illnesses and 23,000 deaths annually. And 70% antibiotics used are considered medically important for humans. The belief that subtherapeutic administration is the best way to maximize health and animal growth appears to only be a persistent theme in the US compared to other developed countries, which is more of a cultural influence. Antibiotics should only be used in livestock when it is medically necessary to do so, and the antibiotics are prescribed by a veterinarian. However, as I will discuss later, that's not always the case. So again, it's important to note that this antibiotic resistance spreads through antibiotics used on humans as well as what's used on companion animals and livestock. This resistance can be prevented by clean food and water, a responsible use of antibiotics, and vaccination. So going along with the antibiotic-resistant bacteria, there's also foodborne illnesses. An example of this would be the E. coli outbreak that affected Chipotle a few years ago, or the romaine chaos that ensued, I think, last year. About 128,000 Americans are hospitalized every year as a result of these types of illnesses, and about 3,000 of that 128,000 die. Modern meat productions allow pathogens to spread easily because most animals are confined in tight, small, shared spaces that are poorly ventilated, so the disease spreads quite easily. It is also important to note that food production is poorly and underregulated by such political organizations such as the FDA, which I will discuss later. Now, before I get into the arguments that are for or against growth hormone antibiotic use, it's important to note that acceptance or disapproval of growth hormone antibiotic usage is heavily influenced by one's beliefs about global food security, climate change, and ethical beliefs. For example, large farms use antibiotics and growth hormones for quicker and more abundant production of animal products. And the more products they have, the more money they make, so they're happy. Consumers are more willing to accept their usage if they believe there's at least one benefit to using them, regardless of what that benefit is. So if it's that it's cheaper, they'll do it. Research shows that consumers with higher level of knowledge regarding these types of products have more positive attitudes for them because they understand what they're putting into their body, which is why they're more readily willing to do so. Now, it's important to note that GMOs have desirable traits such as herbicide tolerance, resistance towards pests and stress, drought and salinity or salt tolerance, and enhanced and improved nutritional values. The properties of these crops can play a very important role in increasing crop production from limited resources, and the main purpose is to produce crops that can resist diseases caused by viruses. So no crop production is harmed. Another 4 is that benefits of producing transgenic animals include the low-cost method, no complexity in the procedure, and it's applicable to a large range of species. These techniques allow breeders and farmers to produce crops and animals with desirable qualities at a much quicker rate. Now, to flip the coin, let's talk about the key arguments against growth hormone and antibiotic usage. For starters, we'll talk about the recombinant growth hormone, or RBST, use that has been studied for possible risk in the formation of various cancers. It's important to note that RBST is used to increase milk production in dairy cows. The second issue is metastasis development in cows. Metastasis is the inflammation in the mammary glands in humans, and in cows it would be their udders. This inflammation is at an increased risk when hormones are used, and then has to be treated with antibiotics, adding to the substantial usage of antibiotics in the food industry. So it's really a lose-lose situation. However, the FDA approved this drug, and it's still used in the food production industry today. It's also important to note somatic cell count levels. Somatic cell count levels measure the number of white blood cells of a cow and is used to track udder health and ensure the quality of milk. However, antibiotic and hormone usage increases these levels, and as a result, the milk will have a shorter shelf life and a high risk of antibiotic residue in the milk, which can cause allergies. Next, I will discuss diethylstilbestrol, or DES, which is a synthetic estrogen hormone that has been linked to cancer risk, especially vaginal cancers, after it was used to fatten chickens and cattle. And as previously discussed, antibiotic-resistant bacteria is a major proponent of why people are against such usage. Now let's discuss the social, cultural, economic, and political factors and influences. So in terms of sociocultural, the believed lack of knowledge of veterinarians plays a major role. Most farmers believe that veterinarians are not properly educated on the health of all animals, such as their goats and their cows. So they do not consult their veterinarian before using antibiotics. Rather, they use their own intuition. Or, if veterinarians aren't involved, they're only mainly contacted by farmers for preventative care or to get access to the antibiotic prescription. However, veterinarians actually play an important role in the prevention of antibiotic usage when they are consulted. And it's important to note that more veterinary schools are taking this into consideration and are making sure their veterinarians are more well-rounded. Another social cultural factor is farmers and social media. Rather than using veterinarians, farmers use the internet and other social media outlets to get in contact with other farmers to see what they're doing on their farms, the health of their animals, and how they use antibiotics and other types of treatment. Facebook is the most frequently used social media platform. It's also important to note attitudes and behavior towards these products are still being studied. Because there seems to be some sort of science, government, and all that jazz difference, it's really hard for consumers to understand whether or not these products are actually good for them, bad for them, what the risks are, what the benefits are. So therefore, they cannot really have a true say when they're not fully educated and informed. Now, looking at the economic aspect of things, inappropriate use of veterinarian services are due to cost. With that being said, some farmers stated that they want to use veterinary services, but the cost is a barrier for them because they could not afford such services. So again, as stated, they use their own knowledge and intuition to care for the animal and purchase their antibiotics on the internet. And this is also troublesome because they might be purchasing the wrong antibiotics because they might be misdiagnosing their animal. The next factor is industry influence. The powerful food industry is eager to fight any regulation that affects its profit because they want to maximize their profit. With that being said, there's a lot of teeter-totter with what is able to do because of this influence in industry. The large monetary contributions to agriculture committees from meat groups. which means that there's huge bias in the economic and political realm, because the interests of the FDA also directly conflict with those of the agricultural industry. But since the industry funds the FDA has restrictions and limitations on pursuing its ability. So it's almost like the FDA is being held or put down by these greedy markets. Now, I will go further into detail on the political Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA aspect of it. But it's also important to know some other names of agencies, such as the USDA, or the United States Department of Agriculture, the Environmental Protection Agency, or the EPA. I also thought it was pretty interesting to discuss President Obama's Get Smart About Antibiotics Week. The Get Smart About Antibiotics Week was Obama's plan to raise awareness about antibiotic overuse and its abuse in September 2014. He created a task force with heads of people in the USDA, NIH, EPA, and other forms of government to create a 5-year plan to address these issues in regards to antibiotic use and create greater surveillance of the epidemic of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So political action on the national level had the most research out of the local, national, and global level. So the FDA's mission centers on public health. So they are in charge of ensuring safety, efficacy, and securing of the nation's food supply. They provide the public with accurate, science-supported information in regards to the medicine and food that one needs to maintain, promote, and improve their health. Sometimes the FDA gets backlash because sometimes these science-supported informations contradict each other, again, making it really hard for consumers to decide what's good and what's not. The FDA is also responsible for protecting animal health by approving and monitoring the safety of their drugs given to animals and making sure their food products are safe to use as a result. The USDA expands economic opportunity for agriculture because they consider economic effects, sustainability, and health effects from potential farm regulations. So the USDA is really more so in charge of how the financial end of things and how certain regulations will impact the growth and profit of farmers. Lastly, the EPA is in charge of protecting human health and environment in regard to food production. However, the confusing and fragmented and overlapping relationship between the FDA and the USDA creates division over which agency is responsible for regulating and monitoring conditions that are vital to human health and safety. However, in 2014, the Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA, tried to help this by potentially expanding the FDA's authority by creating a more comprehensive prevention of plans. And also as a role of this relationship, it's a lot of he said, she said going on and kind of bantering back and forth on what should be done. Again, confusing the American population. I also want to note that currently there is not a lot of research that shows what is being done on the local level. But I personally know that where I live, there are several grocery stores that are committed to selling non-GMO and antibiotic-free products, and there's plenty of farmer markets from where I'm from. Now, let's look at political action on the global level. To begin, the European Commission does not believe that RBST is safe, so it does not support its usage in food production and warns the public about possible health issues that can result. In 1968, the Joint Committee on the Use of Antibiotics in Animal Husbandry and Veterinary Medicine determined feeding antibiotics to animals presents a real threat to the health of both the animals and humans. Since 2006, the European Union has banned use of antibiotics for growth production, and major food chains in these regions are adopting antibiotic-free policies for their meat supplies. The attitudes are the result of a distrust in the food industry that blossomed in the 1990s after Europe suffered heavily from several food safety issues and diseases. European resistance to modified foods reflect more uniform negative consumer attitudes. It is also illegal to give chicken hormones, and cattle are only supposed to receive hormones that are naturally produced in their body, such as estrogen and testosterone. Therefore, in conclusion, the only way to determine whether something is healthy, safe, and environmentally sustainable is by conducting appropriate research that is not culturally or economically biased. However, this is really hard to do considering the FDA's ties to the big bad meat industry. There are several advantages and disadvantages that have been discussed to using antibiotics and growth hormones in the agricultural livestock industries. The biggest advantage seems to be that crops that are used with antibiotics and growth hormone can survive in extreme climates and conditions and can fight off pests, so they're able to be transported across the country or internationally. However, the biggest disadvantage, besides cancer risk, seems to be antibiotic resistant bacteria, because these bacteria are fighting off traditionally used antibiotics, which can create major health issues down the road and possibly even bigger epidemics. The debate and usage of these factors is still heavily influenced by social factors, financial profit and cost, and politics with political organizations like the FDA, USDA, and EPA. It is up to these governmental organizations to promote change and provide education either for the use or the ban of these products and how they impact human health. I say the government's in charge of this because those who are what most people turn to when they get information of what's good for you, what's bad for you, and so on. And that wraps up my presentation. These are my references, and I can't wait to see the rest